As I was preparing this preach, I came across a commentary by Sam Albury, and he draws out this amazing parallel that absolutely blew my mind. And he sends readers to Acts 2. And I don't know if you remember what's happening in Acts 2, but basically Jesus had died, he'd come back to life, and then he descended into heaven, and the disciples are gathered, and they are waiting for the gift of the Holy Spirit. And Luke describes this moment. He says, when the day of Pentecost arrived, they were all together in one place. And suddenly there came from heaven a sound like a mighty rushing wind, and it filled the entire house where they were sitting. And then this. And divided tongues as of fire appeared to them and rested on each one of them. And they were all filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance. Now there were dwelling in Jerusalem Jews, devout men from every nation under heaven. And at this sound the multitude came together, and they were bewildered because each one was hearing them speak in his own language. So the gift of the Holy Spirit came to believers in the form of tongues of fire. Not fire of hell, fire from heaven. And so when we receive the gift of the Holy Spirit, there's this work of transformation that happens in us, and it affects our hearts and our speech. And Sam Albury writes, it's James 3 in reverse. The effects of the tongue are no less widespread, but now the great forest is ablaze with the Spirit of God. The small spark of gospel living is able to change the course of a whole life and even whole communities and nations. Now that really is good news. And then James finishes this letter with these words, verse 18. He says, and a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. So the Apostle Paul tells us that when we're filled with the Holy Spirit, there's a harvest of righteousness. The fruit of the Holy Spirit grows in us. There's the fruit of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. And so my challenge really to us this morning is this. What are you sowing with your tongues? And what are you reaping? In our homes, in our workplaces, in our schools, our universities, our small groups, our church meetings, what are we sowing? And what are we reaping? Because every time we open our mouths, we are sowing. And, I was thinking on a Sunday morning, in a Sunday morning kind of church environment, it's quite easy to put a good front on and to watch our words. But actually, do we watch our words the same when we're in private? And I had the interesting experience this summer of going camping with some of you at our church camp, More Together. And basically, we got delayed. I was driving up with my mum. Simon went down with the kids in a separate car. And it took us 6 hours to get there instead of 2.5. And I am not a camper. I do not camp. And I was feeling quite stressed about the whole thing anyway. And then when we arrived, I've got 3 kids, and they'd arrived hours before us. They were desperate for us to be able to get started and have some food. And they all wanted my attention, and I snapped at them. And I suddenly had this realization that I was in a field surrounded by people from church in tents who could hear every word I said and the tone in which I said it, and I was absolutely mortified. But it made me realize, well, firstly, that the way that I was speaking to my kids was not okay, but also that I shouldn't have a home tone and a church tone, and that's not integrity, that's just, it's fake. So is our speech the same at home as it is at work or at school or at church? And is our speech online the same as it is in person? Are we sowing seeds of peace and blessing in our homes and in our workplaces? Proverbs 10 verse 11 says, the mouth of the righteous is a fountain of life. Or are we sowing seeds of disunity or discontentment at church or in our university halls? The Apostle Paul says in Philippians 2, Do all things without grumbling or disputing, that you may be blameless and innocent, children of God without blemish in the midst of a crooked and twisted generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world. We have the opportunity to speak words that bring life and bring light into a very dark world. So let's do it with wisdom and with humility.